Okay. Let's get ready to rumble. Okay, today we're going to be talking about JavaScript events. Let's just talk about kind of like, before we really jump into this, conceptually what that means. Somebody pick, Airbnb.com. Oh, is this going to make me log in? New York. Okay, great. So I'm on Airbnb.com, okay? Notice what just happened, right? I click dates. Did I just get a page refresh? No. Did the content of my page change significantly? All right, let's go back and see this again, right? So back from their like home page, right? New York, New York, search. Watch again, right? Watch this little loading spinner. If I click homes, am I going to get a page refresh? No. But the content of this page changed pretty significantly. What does that tell us is going on here? What might be responsible for such a dramatic change in our document object model? JavaScript! This is a single page application, right? Like I click something and notice the page changes, right? This thing appears, right? This modal appears. Show map. And I get a map that shows up, right? Again, right? As a user, what am I doing? Clicking stuff. And JavaScript seems to be responding to these click events. Okay. So let's just kind of think about this. Conceptually, high level, even if it's like a wild guess. What do we think JavaScript must be doing when the user, for example, clicks this button that says show map? Probably listening for clicks on this button, right? And then responding in some way. And today we're going to be learning about that. Before I get into this, something that I would strongly recommend everybody do. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you can say open 31 index.html, and it will open in your default browser, which, by the way, should be Chrome. If it is not Chrome, please switch to Chrome. Internet Explorer, no good. I don't think anybody has Internet Explorer in here, but
Can you get it on Mac?
I don't think so. Probably not. Just FYI. Okay. What I would like to happen in this application, eventually we're going to be building this out. I want to type in a comment. Somebody shout out a comment. We're just making a commenting feature. Hi. And I'm going to click enter, click submit, and I want that comment to appear at the bottom of the page. Obviously, this didn't happen. So let's kind of think about this, right? Like before we jump into the actual code, like what even are JavaScript events? Well, from the documentation, in the case of the web, events are fired inside the browser window and tend to be attached to a specific item or element that resides in it. This might be an HTML element, a set of HTML elements, the document itself, or the browser window. There are different types of events that can occur. For example, the user clicking the mouse, which we saw in our example here, right? Clicking the mouse or clicking something, right? The user pressing a key on the keyboard, the user resizing, a form being submitted, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, right? And an error being an error or some video being played. If you want to take a look at the all of the events that exist, there are quite a few, as we can see. These are all of the events that can occur in the browser. Again, don't worry about memorizing this big list. If you are asking yourself, how can I, in JavaScript, do something with drag? Well, maybe, great, drag and drop events. There's a whole section on it. Click. There's a whole thing on click. Scroll. Oh, great, there's a scroll event, right? There's an event for just about everything. Oh, whoops, that's not, sorry, that was a reflex. I actually didn't mean to open my Chrome console. I just it's like file save and like opening the Chrome console. It's just like, I don't even think about it anymore. So there's a ton of events that happen in the browser, right? And we can actually tell JavaScript to listen for these events. So let's think about kind of a simple example. When we're interacting, or I guess more specifically, what thing are we kind of interacting with whenever we're writing JavaScript to change the page? DOM, the document object model, right? And we learned that the document is just a big old object, a bunch of key value pairs. One of those keys happens to be getElementById, right? And technically speaking, right, like the document is an element, right? Just like any h1 tag. Well, elements, right? Any node in our tree also has a key on it called add event listener, which can actually attach an event listener to our page. So let's see this in action here. Document dot add event listener, and the syntax for this, right? If we look at mdn add event listener. All right, go back. Yeah, element.add event listener. Oh no, sorry. I wanted the first one. Yeah. Add event listener method sets up a function that will be called wherever the specified event is delivered to the target. Okay. It looks like it takes in the type a string representing the event type, and then some listener function. Okay, and we'll kind of like break this down in a second, but let's say that I want to listen for click events on just everywhere in the document. What I would do is say document add event listener for the click event, and this takes in as a second argument a function. By the way, what type of function, or what is this function called when it's passed to another function as an argument? A callback, right? We're going to see these a lot. Add event listener is looking for the event and some callback. So when the browser says, hey, something got clicked, we're going to invoke this function. So let's just console.log click. Click, 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 click. Right? Kind of a simple way that we can listen for click events. So let's kind of break down some of the terminology here. So each available event, right, of which there are many, right, scroll, click, form submitted, window resizing, so on and so forth, right? Each available event has an event handler, which is a block of code, usually a user-defined JavaScript function, a callback function that will be run when the event fires. So let's kind of think about what the timeline is in our browser. I, the user, click on something. The browser says, hey, a click event occurred. JavaScript is listening for that and responds with this callback function. Again, back to the Airbnb example. We're listening for some click on this button. When the user clicks, JavaScript will jump in and say, oh, great, this click happened. Let me do something based on what I was told to do. So really all we need to do is tell JavaScript, hey, I want you to listen for some type of event on some part of the page. Some node in our tree will receive some kind of event like a click, like typing, like a change, a form being submitted, right? And we need to be able to listen to those in JavaScript. So that's what our event handler is. It's the function that actually handles the event. Okay. Note that event handlers are sometimes called event listeners, basically the same thing. So, and then here's the example that we were looking at, right? Query selector button, and then we can listen for clicks on that button. So let's see another example. Let's say that in my index.html, index.html, I have did I have a button in here? Okay. Let's say that I just want to grab like the very first, actually I'll come back to that in a second. Let's say that I want to listen for clicks on like the very first H3 on the page. How would I do that?
Query selector.
So const first header is equal to
document.query selector.
query select. And what is query selector going to do?
It's going to return the first one that matches.
Yeah, it's going to return the first H3 that it finds. So let's just test this out. Log first header. Okay. Refresh. And I should expect to see, document.query selector H3. Oh, okay. Yeah. I got a little ahead of myself here. We'll talk about what's going on here in a minute. Okay. Document, okay. We'll talk about what just happened here, why this was null. Okay. Document.query selector. And I can say .add event listener. Click. And I can pass it a reference to a function, right? A callback function. So what about console.log? Is this a reference to a function? Yes, right? I'm not invoking it, right? There's no parentheses. I'm just saying here. Invoke, right? Call console log when you receive the click event, right? Call the callback when something happens, right? This is like we're writing our application based on some event. We're responding to events from the user. If I click on comments, right? We're going to log some big object, and we'll talk about what this thing is. But notice how now, if I click away, right? We're kind of ignoring these clicks because we're only listening for clicks on this comments thing. Okay. Now let's talk about what just happened here. I'm going to put a debugger in here. And now let's take a look very carefully at my index.html. What do we notice here? HTML documents, right, are read and parsed by the browser, top to bottom, left to right. Exactly. The index.js file will load and immediately start executing before the body is actually done rendering, right? Notice we're going to see a console log and then a debugger. So what I should expect to see is actually to, let me put this on the side. I'm going to refresh the page. There we go. And I'm going to open up my console. Let's take a look at document. Where's our body? Document.body. Interesting, right? So what's going on here? The body's not done rendering yet, right? Our JavaScript is firing too fast. This body tag is after the JavaScript file is loaded into our application. So if I immediately start trying to grab things on the page before the rest of my content has loaded and parsed, then I'm going to get a bunch of nulls, right? Notice that, like, if I try to run, for example, right, look at the page, right? We're paused in the debugger. Where's my HTML? It's not here yet. So if I just copy and paste this line, right, document query selector H3, I'm going to get back nothing because it's not on the page yet. So there's actually a special event, right, that I referenced earlier, a web page finishing loading that we can listen for. Does anybody know what this event is? What?
Window unload.
That's another one. Ready's a little, actually dot ready I think is a jQuery function. So it's called document. Well, first of all, what I'm going to do is listen for the event of the page finishing loading. In other words, I only want my JavaScript to run after this whole HTML has actually made it onto the page, right? Otherwise, I can't be grabbing elements from the tree that aren't there yet. So document.add event listener. And the event that I'm listening for is DOM content loaded. I'm going to pass this as an argument, a function. That can have a name or not. I can call this like on doc load or call it nothing. Doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to take my code and move it inside of the body of this function. Notice that our function starts on line 3 and closes on line 9. If I play through, where am I? Right? I play through my debugger, my page loads. I'm now going to refresh. I hit my debugger. And now, let me try document query selector, H3. It's now on the page. Why? What are we doing just in this kind of snippet of code?
Telling the console to log the H3 that you grabbed.
When specifically?
When they're done.
Exactly. After our HTML is done being loaded and rendered to the page, then we will do something. We're kind of waiting to do something until another action has occurred. All right? The thing that we're waiting for is for the HTML to actually be made like ready on the page. Does everybody kind of understand the problem here, right? Why we need to wait for the DOM content to load. Otherwise, we're going to get a bunch of nulls if we try to traverse the tree, because the tree's not there yet. JavaScript is just going to run too fast. I've avoided this intentionally by loading my script files at the bottom, just to kind of get around this for now. But this is something to be aware of. Super be aware of this kind of like timeline of events. There's another way. I think we can say like defer in here, and it'll do the same thing. But the reason why I want to bring this up is that it allows us to kind of go over a couple things, right? What is this? A callback, right? So we can refer back to callbacks. This allows us to kind of think about how scope works, right? What's the scope of first header? Inside this callback function. It's not global, right? It lives inside of this callback function. Okay? And, right, this function is only called after the DOM content loads, after some event occurs. Questions about this part so far? Yes?
Why wouldn't you just always put the JavaScript at the bottom of the file?
You could, or you could defer. The reason why I prefer to do it this way is just to like kind of like remind everybody that this is like, there's a series of events that are occurring and we're trying to respond to them. But yeah, you could load your scripts at the bottom of the file too, fine. You'll see this a lot in some of the labs too. So it's something to be familiar with and like be aware of, that it exists. Right? Because it kind of forces us to think about scope as well. Right? All the variables in here are only available, right? They're scoped to this function, right? To this callback function. Okay. So talked about event handlers, great listening for events, blah, 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 blah. Okay, talked about this. Great, event listener, da-da-da-da. Okay. So what I would like to do, back to kind of like the core functionality that I'm looking for in my app. I want to be able to type a comment, click submit, and have something happen. Huh. Everybody see that? Why did I hit my debugger again? Let me click submit.
You're not submitting the form, you're just clicking a button.
Ah, let's take a look at where this button is.
But you're not like posting it.
Well, what do forms do? HTML forms. This is something that I ask everybody to just burn into your memory. HTML forms are designed to, all they want to do is submit. That's like their whole jam. It's like, I was put on this DOM to submit. And that's what they try to do. So, how do I tell my form where it's going to submit to? Do you remember what attribute from last mod did we learn about? It rhymes with schmaction. Action equals hot dog. Method equals post, right? The HTTP verb we want to use, right? Now let's try this again. I've set the action to hot dog. I'm going to refresh the page, play through my debugger, click submit. What did it just do? It posted to /hot dog. What happens if I just get rid of that action? Let me get rid of this debugger actually real quick. Okay. And now click submit.
It doesn't know where to post.
what it's doing, because I didn't specify a place to post to, it will post to the same place that we are at right now, which will cause this to look like, to appear as though we're refreshing the page, even though that's not what's happening. Right? The form is just trying to submit to where we currently are. Since nothing is really catching that submission, it looks like a page refresh. Right? This gradient kind of makes it a little bit clearer, right? This is an animated gradient. You can see it's kind of like the color's changing. If I submit, it like sets back to the original like gradient color. Okay? This is something important to know, right? HTML forms want to submit. They want to submit, they want to submit, they want to submit. Burn it. Burn it into your memory. It's super important. Okay? We'll come back to that in a second. Follow-up question. Does submit sound like some type of user event or browser event? Probably, right? That sounds like a thing that's happening, right? A form is submitting, right? That's some type of event. So how might we be able to find this form and listen for submit events on it? There's 2 steps. Find the form. So let's say constant comment form is equal to document.query selector. And does this form have an ID? Comment form. And now, again, just to verify, comment form. And again, this is something that I would highly recommend you do yourself. Make sure that your query selector worked before moving on. I'm writing this little bit of code, and I'm just going to test it immediately. Right? If my process is to introduce a small amount of code, test it, and then move on, I'm going to have a much better time debugging. Versus, I write this much code, my bug could be way up here, and I have to now trace it all the way back. So write a little bit, console log, make sure it does what I think it's supposed to do. Keep going. And we refresh, and here's my comment form. Confirmed. Right? Seems to be working. Now, how do I listen for a submit event? Yeah, right. Comment form dot add event listener that takes in as a first argument a string representing the type of event. What did we establish the type of event is? What do forms do? Submit. An important distinction too here. Notice that clicking the button seemed to cause the form to submit. Why? Oh. What does that comment say? More specifically, right, like any child, well, children of a form will actually cause it to submit in certain cases. What do I mean by that? Oh, sorry, because I didn't finish this out. Hang on. Did everybody see that error message, right? I didn't give event listener a second argument of a function, so the browser was like, wait. I need 2 arguments, but you only gave me 1. This is one of those cases where JavaScript will actually like yell at you for too few arguments, but that's because that's how add event listener is set up. Normally, JavaScript ignores any extra arguments that it's not looking for. Okay. From here, I'm going to press enter on my keyboard. What did that look like? Watch this little spinner right here. Everybody see it move? Right? Pressing enter from the keyboard or clicking submit cause this form to submit because they are children of the form. Okay? So that tells us, right, when we are dealing with forms, we're not really listening for click events. We're listening for submit events. Forms and all of their children, when we are dealing with forms, another thing to burn into your memory, when we are dealing with forms, 99% of the time, it's a submit event we're looking for because what do forms do? Submit, right? That's what they're designed to do. So if there's a button inside your form, you actually want to listen for the submit event on the form itself, not the button. Is that distinction clear? Anybody have any questions about that? Like why it's submit and not click here? Right? Even a click event would still cause the form to submit. At the end of the day, it's still a submit event. Okay. Add event listener submit, and I can give this a function. This can be a named or anonymous function. Does anybody have a preference? Sure. Okay, sure. Remember when I passed console log and we saw that like giant object pass through? What that is something called the event object. This is automatically provided by add-event-listener to our callback, to our event handler. It's a special object containing information about the event, about the submit event, about the DOM content loaded event, about the click event, so on and so forth, right? Whatever thing happened, whatever event occurred. So I'm going to log the event and refresh the page. And now I'm just going to type something. Hello, hit enter. Let me see that for a second. Again, why does it still look like our page is refreshing? I think there's a GIF I have. Yeah. We see our console log for a second, then it will disappear. Forms will attempt to make an HTTP post request on submission. Recall from mod 2 that our forms would send a post request that was then handled by our controller. Remember Rails? Remember? Or whatever, right? And then the hot dog thing, I guess I used the hot dog example twice. Fine. Okay. So our current JavaScript application, our current JS app is not current, I meant to fix this last time, is not currently sending data to a backend. So we'll need some way to prevent this default action of submitting the form. Yeah. Defined on the event object is a special function called prevent default. So what I can do is event.prevent default, and this will say prevent the form from its default action of posting. Okay, refresh the page. Nice. And there's our giant event object. Inside of it, a ton of information. Still a ton of information. Not as big as some of the other objects we've seen. Okay. So we're getting closer, right? We're slowly working our way to something like this, or maybe something like this, right? Right? Still a form, some submit action that's been hijacked, right? Okay, so what I want to be able to do is grab the string that the user typed in here. How might I be able to get this? Let's take a look at our HTML again. Here's our form. Hey. Which one of these things is the thing that the user types into? Input. Does that input have some way of, like, some unique identifier? ID, yeah. Right? A unique ID that says new comment. So maybe I can say something like constant user input field is equal to document.query selector new comment. Right? Let's refresh. There it is. But how do I actually grab this information out of it? Well, we learned earlier, right? Like p tags have an inner text attribute, image tags have an src attribute. What do input fields have? Value. Okay. One more thing. Notice that I'm starting from the document. Is my new comment a child of anything? Any thoughts about how I might be able to access the form from in here? Ooh, also that, yeah. I'm going to write this in 3 different ways. Okay. Comment form.query selector, right? Because again, what do we remember from lexical scope and closures? Can I look up and find a variable that's outside of my current scope? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, so I can do this. Also works. Refresh. Hello. Works fine. And remember this event object? Let me log this again. There's a key of target. Looks like it points to comment form. What can we infer the target, the event's target may be? Well, it is the form, but why is it the form? Why is the event's target the form? What do we think like a target of an event might be, generally speaking?
Place where you listen.
How about this? Document.add event listener. Click, whoops. Click. And function that takes in the event. Console.log. Event.target. Okay. And I'm going to click around. This seems to be our entire document. This seems to be a button. Another button. Another button. Our target seems to be changing depending upon the thing that I clicked or the element that received the event, the element that is broadcasting the event through our system. So who's actually broadcasting the submit event? Like which element, which tag is broadcasting the submit event in our app? The form. Therefore, the event's target is the form. So the event.target will be the element or node that received the event. So another way to write this is event.target.querySelector, right? Because event.target is the form. Is this form a node in our tree? Yes. Can we call querySelector on any node in the tree? Yes. Does this node have a child with an ID of new comment? Yes. Therefore, we can just say, hey form, grab me the new comment. Grab me the input field. And we can just log user input field dot value. Save and refresh. Hi. Still works. Cool. Yes?
Is one option more specific
It's not really a question of like which one's more explicit. The kind of like drawback of starting at the document is that we have to traverse through the entire tree, right? Like what we're basically, let me pull these up again. 10, or actually I think I still have it open. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So instead of starting here and going all the way down to our form, we can start maybe like here is our form and only search from here to here. We're kind of like scoping down the amount that we have to traverse. You can imagine like if our document like grew significantly in size, it would save us a little bit of effort to start at a particular point and then traverse rather than like we always have to go to the top and then go all the way down. So there's not a significant difference. Oh wow, I have too many windows open. There's not a significant difference between comment form and event target. There is a significant difference with document, right? Because we're starting at the kind of the root of our tree. But this and this are equivalent. Yeah, and this is also fine. It's just like, just know that you're starting at the root and like going all the way down. Questions about this so far? Yes?
If we need to do the DOM content loaded, do we have to start at document? We can't scope down, right?
Oh yeah, because like the DOM content loaded event occurs on the document. Yeah. Like right, like certain events like occur, like a click can happen anywhere or on a button, right? DOM content loaded is a special thing that happens really only on the document. Yeah, but we have like ready access to the document. Like we don't have to like search for this. It's just like we just have access to it. Other questions about this? Okay. I seem to be able to have access to the string that the user typed in. How can I get this to appear on my page? Let's look at the structure of our HTML. We seem to have a div with an ID of comments container. How might I be able to like take that string that the user typed and add it to this div? Yeah, so maybe I can do something like, and I'm gonna do this in like one big messy function. Don't worry about it for right now. Like don't worry about like cleaning this up for right now. We'll get there. I just want to like, I don't want to move things around too much because it might get a little confusing at first. So how can I find the div that I want to append or add my comments to? Yeah. Const, right? Comment div is equal to document dot query selector. And what's this called? Comments container. Comments container. Right. How do we feel about putting this inside the submit handler?
Inside.
Like inside of our submit form function. Why? It's redundant, right? We don't need to keep like looking for this. Like, I guess my question is this div ever going to disappear from our page? No. So why don't we just grab it when the page first loads? Since we know that this is like a static element, right? It's never going to be removed from the page as far as we're aware right now. So why not just grab it once instead of like every time the submit happens, we like reach down and grab it again, right? So we can just save it to a variable here and only have to look for it once. Yes?
Is there any difference in performance of how quickly the query selector grabs the right item if you don't start from root as opposed to start from document?
Oh,
It's a really complicated page, let's say.
yeah. I mean, like it depends on like how complex your page is. It's for our purposes like not really significant. And when we get to React handles that in a kind of interesting way. Yeah, but like in this case, right? Like I'm like starting at this like form and going down, which is a little bit faster. But like for this application, we're not really going to notice a difference. Okay, here's our comment div. What I want to do is add comments here. Let's say I want to make some p tags. How do I make some p tags? Every time the user submits the form. Constant new p tag is equal to document dot create element. And what does create element take as an argument? Name of tag, p. Okay. And then how do I get that onto the page? Or how do I get that inside of my div? Yeah. Comment div. And again, scope and closures. Do I have access to comment div inside of this submit form function? Yes. Why? Well, it's actually not global. It's inside my my function, but I can still look up, right? I can look outside my current scope and grab comment div dot append child new p tag.
Can you do the inner text?
Ah, yes. Did everybody see what I forgot to do? What will happen if we run this as is? Yeah, right. Like, how do I actually? I want to set the text of this p tag. So what I have to do is new p tag dot inner text is equal to user input field dot value. Right? Yes. Question was, what is the difference between inner text and inner HTML? Document.body.inner text. Okay. Document.body.inner HTML. What seems to be the difference between these two? Well, the inner HTML seems to be a string, right? Open quotes, representing the actual HTML, the HTML tags in their entirety. Inner text appears to just be the words that the user sees, right? Comments, submit, hi, alert me, right? We're just seeing the actual text on the page, versus inner HTML is actually a string representing the HTML. We'll talk about like how we can also manipulate the page using inner HTML tomorrow. Yes?
What about text content?
I think there's like a slight difference between
I saw it earlier.
text. Oh, yeah, text content preserves the new lines, right? Notice how inner text, right, like this is like indented and there's a bunch of empty spaces. It basically like preserves the white space that the divs create, versus inner text is just the words, right? Like kind of like not really separated. There's like a couple new lines here, but this actually is like everything kind of like minus the HTML tags.
Like a combination kind of inner.
Kind of, yeah. It's like preserving like the structure. Do we think this will work as is? Let's find out. Hi. Nice. Wow. Technology. Technique. Technology. One last thing. This is kind of a wacky user experience. I have to manually delete what was in here. Does anybody know how I can reset a form?
Reset.
Yes. Is that event.target is what? Exactly. Yeah. Event.target is the form itself. Event.target.reset will reset the form to its initial state, how it was in the HTML file when page first loaded. Ooh, yeet. I like yeet. Yeet is one of my favorite ones. Let's get this bread. Bread. Cheese. Nice. Nice. Okay. Questions about this part? We're almost ready for like a 5-minute break, and then there's like one more concept to go over, and then we're done, and we can yeet out of here and get back to labs. Questions about this so far? What are we doing high level? Well, we're using JavaScript to hijack events. We're using JavaScript to listen for things on the page and to basically like intercept them and do something when that happens, right? This is kind of like an event-driven application because we're responding to events, clicking, the page loading. As we'll see, some call to a server coming back. Yes?
In the scope of this callback that's handling all these.
Talking about submit form that opens here and closes here.
What does this refer to?
The form itself. We'll talk about why that is. So this keyword is something that we will talk about later. There's a couple other things we have to kind of like learn before we get there. For right now, know that it exists and it's kind of interesting, but there's going to be like a dedicated lecture on this. Just not today, but in soon. Yeah, we'll talk about that. It's kind of a larger topic though. Cool. Are we ready for a quick break? Quick intermission? Intermish? All right, let's go ahead and pause. Okay, we are back from the break. We talked about like listening for submit events. There's one other kind of big topic or concept that I want to talk about. Notice that I have in here a div called helicopter parent inside of which there's a div, a break, a div, a break, a div, a p tag, a div, and some buttons. Okay. If I wanted to grab all these buttons, right? Like, let's say I just wanted to grab these buttons. Does anybody know how I would do that?
All of them?
Yeah, all of them. Query selector all, right? I can say document.query selector all, and I can say look for
ID, which is helicopter parent.
yep, an ID of helicopter dash parent, and I just want buttons. Gives me a node list of 3 buttons. Okay. All right. Chrome is also going to tell me where this is on the page, by the way, if I hover over it. Thanks, Chrome. Shout out to Google Chrome. Let's say that I wanted to listen for clicks on all these buttons. I guess I could like loop through my node list and attach an event listener for each individual button. Right? Seemed kind of reasonable. Seemed like something that's at least possible, right?
Can you save it to there?
I could, but I still have to like iterate over them, right? But what if I have 50 buttons and I want them all to kind of like do the same thing when I click on them? What if I have 100 buttons and I want them to do the same thing when I click on them? Does that seem kind of inefficient, kind of like wasteful, annoying to attach like 50 duplicate event listeners? Enter. Event delegation. Event delegation allows us to leverage something called event bubbling. So here's our document, window, document, HTML, body, table, da 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 da. Let's say that I click this particular TD. What's going to happen is that event will be sent up to that node's parent, to its node's parent, and so on and so on and so on, until it eventually makes it to the document and then the window itself. What does this mean, really, realistically, for application? Any parent of an element will know about things that happen to its children, because any event on a child will be sent up the tree. Yes?
Then you would be able to access it by getting the ID of the parent,
Yeah,
because the parent node means that they would all be children.
correct. So instead of creating an event listener for this button, an event listener for this button, an event listener for this button, what I can do is attach one event listener for my helicopter parent div and listen for clicks on there. So anything inside of this will tell that parent, hey, I got clicked. Right? This event delegation, like conceptually, is super, super important. Right? The idea that we can like attach one event listener instead of having a series of duplicated event listeners. So let's grab this div. So document.getElementById or query selector. I don't really have a preference in this case. Helicopter dash parent dot add event listener. Any questions about this chaining, by the way? Does this seem like an illegal operation? Does this seem strange? It's not. It's totally fine. It's totally fine, right? Like, because what does this expression give me back? The helicopter parent. And then can I call add event listener on that? Yeah. Click, and now we're just going to fun tab and pass in E or event and just log E. And how do I tell from the event, how do I tell which thing received the event? It rhymes with schmarget. Yeah. It is also the name of my favorite store. So now we're only listening for clicks within this div, right? The hi, right? This is still inside of our helicopter parent. But what if I want some way to kind of like use some logic to delegate what should happen based on some unique property of my event target? Is anybody familiar with something called a data set? Well, we've seen that IDs and classes on our HTML tags allow us to kind of like find them in the tree, right? Find them in the DOM. but they're kind of like more used for like CSS. What if I want to store some piece of information inside of an HTML tag, like some kind of like container, almost like a variable for an HTML tag? I can use something called a data set. And what I would look up to, let's do this right now, MDN data set. The data set property on the HTML element interface provides read-write access to all the custom data attributes set on the element. This access is available both in HTML and within the DOM. Itself can be read, blah, 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 okay? There's something on like the name conventions. But what this means for our purposes is that I can store some piece of information. And I can access it with a special object called dataset. So let's log event.target.dataset should give me this object. Let's refresh. Notice that my H1, my P tag, doesn't have a dataset. My button has a name of alert. Each one of these buttons has a different dataset.name. Okay. Do we see how we can kind of like maybe write some if-else statements to figure out what to do based on the type of thing that was clicked? Right? Seem reasonable? So maybe I can say if e.target.dataset.name, right? Because they all have a key of name. It's just an object, a key of name. Or actually, e.target.dataset.name. Anybody have questions about a switch case? We saw these in Ruby, right? It's kind of like an alternative way to write like some what am I looking for? Sorry?
The lab from last week?
Yeah.
They showed a case.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, control flow, right? Instead of like if, else, if.
One situation and you're checking.
Yeah. Exactly. Right? Alert. Window dot alert. You clicked the alert button. I'll write this out in an if statement so we can see them side by side. Let's click the alert me. You clicked, my spelling. Okay? If I console log something, console.error. So, case log and case error, right? Maybe we can log, you clicked log, and error, we can, does everybody know about error? Console.error. So just a heads up real quick. So there's a lot of like different console methods aside from console.log. So like console.error, danger ops. Just shows up red as an error. I can also console.warn, which will show up yellow, like a warning. And perhaps my favorite, .table. Ooh. This is going to be super helpful once we start talking to our server and get some nasty JSON object back with like 50 keys in it.
Ruby doesn't have it.
We're going to get back into the land of hashkeball. It's going to be hashkeball forever once we start getting data from our server. Right? Like imagine like reddit.com/.json, right? Look at this. Oi, yikes. Wouldn't it be great if there's like a nice, concise way to print that out? So console.table, by the way, as an aside, it's pretty sweet, right? Pizza, Hut, coffee, strong, index or key, right? Value. Nice. Okay. But we're just adding some control flow, right? Depending on the data set, right? And by the way, naming convention in HTML, data dash name in JavaScript, data set dot name. Kind of strange at first, but that's how it's written in HTML, right? HTML, the convention is to dash separate things. JavaScript, it is to use lower camel case, right? Ruby was snake case. JavaScript is camel case, right?
Why do they take different things? Is that just the person who developed?
Why is through spelled the way it is in English? I don't know. It just is what it is. Why can't I put milk in my car instead of gasoline? You can. I mean, but like, you can, but like, some bad things might happen. Right? Like, there's like, for that kind of thing, there's not an answer aside from like, that's a convention. We just decided upon it, right? Why in English do we only have question marks at the end of the sentences? That's just how it is. Yeah. Just decided on these conventions. They, right? That grand they that like nobody really knows who they are. Anyway, I click alert, I see an alert. I click console log, I see a console log. Click error, I see clicked error. Do we see how this might turn into something powerful possibly? Maybe this is like some way to add some better control flow to our application. Conceptually, the takeaway is that this is what's happening, right? Imagine this is what happens. I click the button, it's passed up, right? This button gets clicked, the div knows about it. The div then tells or actually its parent, which would be the p tag, tells the other div and then tells this div and so on and so forth until helicopter parent knows about the things that happen to its children. Events are just sent up and then they're captured back down. So they're actually sent up and down. We can ignore the second part of like being sent back down for now. We're not really going to interact with it. But the important thing is we go up and parents know about things that happen to their children. Nice. Questions about this? Yes?
Could you reiterate why you need e.target versus just e? What's the dot?
Yeah. Great question. Great questions. The question was, why do I need e.target? What's your favorite color? Great. The event target is e dot. What's your second favorite color? Ooh, cyan. Which is the one that printers always yell? Is it cyan?
Yeah.
Printers are always like, I need cyan. Give me cyan. Feed me cyan. I'm going to click this button. Or I'm going to click console log. No! Oh my God, you fool! Andrew, come on. Where's your %C? Okay, let's try this again. The event is okay. I think it'll work if I do it like this instead. E.target. There we go. The event is mouse event, which is a big old object. Tells us where was the user's X coordinate of their mouse, the Y coordinate of their mouse. Kind of interesting that we're able to see that. Ooh, starting to get some thoughts about how I might be able to use this. Interesting. There's actually some companies out there that will use JavaScript to kind of watch your mouse, and as you start to navigate away towards like closing the tab, it might show you a little modal that's like, hey, here's a coupon. You sure you want to leave? You sure you want to disappear right now? JavaScript. Path, related targets, screen X. I think this is also like the size of your window. Oh, the timestamp, when did this happen? The type of event, which was a click event. Which is like, well, this would be like a key press. So technically like that's our mouse. And then inside of this, we have a target, right? So the target is part of the event. It's just the thing that received the event, the thing that got clicked. So the event is like the entire event, like the whole, like the click event, and the target is the thing that received it. So right, if I submit a form, the form will be the target because it's the thing that's like submitting the event. And then the event target is actually like the button itself, right? If I click this console.error, I'm going to get a different target because a different thing was clicked. And it's going to be a different event object, right? Because my X and Y and everything else was a different instance of a click. Other questions? Yes?
Is that how they prevent like some websites prevent you from right clicking? Is that through like implicit?
Ooh, I think you can actually do that, yeah, because you can also listen for like when people press the command key and like control and stuff like that, you can make like custom keyboard shortcuts. Like for example, calendar.google.com. There's a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts. Watch. Oh, I went to the wrong calendar. Hang on, wait. Hang on. It's too many tabs, okay? Right, keyboard shortcut, keyboard shortcut, keyboard shortcut. Right, this is all JavaScript, right? I press D for day, W for week, I think M for month. Wow.
So technically you can customize your keyboard shortcuts if you edit it.
Yes, right. Have you ever noticed that like in Gmail, for example, Command B will make your text bold? Same with Google Docs, because they're listening for the user to press like I think it's called like the meta key or something like that. It's like Command on Mac or Control in Windows. Right, it's like the same functionality as far as the browser is concerned. Yeah, you can listen for certain key combinations, keyboard shortcuts, and implement some custom functionality. JavaScript, so cool. But again, we're just the intro to this stuff. There's much more to see. Other questions? Any questions? How do we feel? Okay. All right. Cool. Last chance for questions.
Did you scroll forever?
Yeah. Sorry. I'll push this code up too if you want to take a look at it. I'll just Slack it out with the as per usual long AF README, but kind of summarizes everything we talked about. Thanks, everybody.